All right, so you know how sometimes the simplest things in life can actually reveal some pretty profound insights?
Oh, absolutely. Sometimes it's those everyday moments that really make you stop and think.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what we're going to be diving into today.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What kind of everyday moment are we talking about?
Well, imagine this. You've got a grandma who wants to take her grandson for a walk, right?
Uh-huh, classic grandma move.
Totally. But the kid, well, he's glued to his tablet, completely engrossed in whatever digital world he's in.
Yeah, I can practically picture the eye rolls and the I don't want to go vibes.
Right. But then grandma does something a little different. Instead of saying, come on, we're going this way, she asks him to lead the walk.
Oh, interesting. So she's putting him in charge.
Exactly. She says, hey, why don't you show me your favorite spots in the neighborhood? You decide where we go.
And what happens? Does he suddenly transform into an eager explorer?
You bet. That initial resistance just melts away, and he's suddenly excited, energized, ready to take the lead.
That's fascinating. So it's like that simple act of giving him control completely shifted his whole attitude.
And that's precisely what we're going to unpack today. We're going to explore how this idea of motor leadership, who's deciding the movements, can have a huge impact on motivation, curiosity, even what's going on in our brains.
Sounds like we're venturing into the realm of neuroscience here.
Oh, definitely. Our deep dive today is inspired by an article, actually. It came out on March 28th, 2025. The title's mouthful. It's called Motor Science in Action, Understanding Leadership and Engagement in Movement. And it's by Shiva Narayan Taxshila Page.
Okay, so we're talking about real science here, not just anecdotal observations about grandmas and grandkids.
Right. And the really cool thing is, this isn't just about kids either. This concept has implications for how we all learn and interact with the world, no matter our age.
All right, so let's break this down. Let's go back to that initial scenario with the grandma and grandson. What's the real difference between those two situations?
Well, when the grandma leads, there's that hesitation, right? Maybe even a bit of defiance from the kid.
Yeah, a classic power struggle brewing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when he gets to lead, he's all in. He's making decisions, pointing things out, owning the experience.
And the article gives a name to this phenomenon, right? This power of leading the movement.
Yes. It's called motor leadership. And basically it means having control over your own movement and the environment you're moving in.
So it's not just about walking, it's about having agency, making choices about how and where you move.
Precisely. And there's another key concept here, motor initiation. That's your brain's ability to start those voluntary movements, to say, okay, I'm going to move this way now.
So when the child takes the lead, he's exercising both motor leadership and motor initiation.
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting. The article dives into what happens in the brain when the child takes charge. It suggests that this sense of autonomy actually activates the brain's reward system.
The reward system. You mean like when we experience pleasure or get something we really want?
Exactly. We're talking about specific parts of the brain, the substantia nigra and the ventral tegmental area. And when they're stimulated, they release dopamine.
Ah, dopamine, the feel-good neurotransmitter. So leading the walk is actually giving him a little dopamine rush.
That's the idea. It's like his brain is saying, hey, this is fun. We're in control. Let's do more of this.
So it's not just willpower or a sudden change of heart. There's actual brain chemistry at work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And think about the flip side. When grandma's leading, he might feel more passive, like he's just along for the ride. That reduces his sense of agency, his feeling of control, and that can actually dampen his motivation to engage.
So it's not just about wanting to be in charge. It's about how our brains are wired to respond to having control over our own actions.
That's right. Now, the article doesn't stop there. It actually gets even more specific about which parts of the brain are activated when the child leads the walk.
Oh, okay. So we're going full-on brain anatomy here.
Well, yeah, kind of. It highlights the motor cortex, which is responsible for, well, all those voluntary movements, actually making his legs move and navigate the path.
Right, that makes sense. So what else is firing up there?
The basal ganglia are also involved. They play a huge role in coordinating those movements and making decisions like, should we turn left here or go straight?
Oh, so the planning and decision-making parts of the brain are also getting a workout.
Exactly. And we can't forget the cerebellum, which is all about fine-tuning the movements and keeping him balanced as he walks.
Especially important if they're venturing off the paved sidewalks, maybe exploring a bit of uneven terrain.
Yeah, good point. And then there's the prefrontal cortex,
Hmm.
which is involved in all those higher-level cognitive functions like decision-making and planning.
The prefrontal cortex, that's like the executive control center of the brain, right?
Exactly. So in this context, it might be the child deciding which landmarks to show his grandma, what route will best showcase his favorite spots.
So we've got the motor cortex for movement, the basal ganglia for coordination and decisions, the cerebellum for balance, and the prefrontal cortex for planning and executive function, all working together when he's leading the walk.
It's like a symphony of brain activity, all orchestrated by this simple act of letting him lead.
And when grandma's leading, are those areas just kind of dormant?
Well, they're definitely not as engaged. He's not having to make as many decisions, plan the route, or actively navigate.
So even though he's still physically walking in both scenarios, his brain is having a totally different experience depending on who's leading.
Exactly. And this is where the article takes things to another level. It links this idea of motor leadership to a concept called motor-driven knowledge transfer.
Motor-driven knowledge transfer. Okay, break that down for me. It sounds pretty complex.
Well, it's connected to this idea called learnography, which basically says that learning is much more effective when we're actively doing something rather than just passively taking in information.
So like hands-on learning, learning by doing.
That's a good way to put it. In our walk example, by leading, the child is actively engaging in the act of navigating and directing the walk. It's not just a passive stroll, it's an interactive learning experience.
So the walk becomes a way for him to learn about his environment, to build a mental map of his neighborhood.
Exactly. And the article points out that this kind of motor leadership can boost some really important cognitive and emotional functions. First up, it activates curiosity.
Makes sense. When you're in control, you're more likely to be looking for interesting things, trying to discover new things.
If you're just following someone, you might not be as attentive to what's around you. But when you're leading, you're constantly scanning your surroundings, looking for things to discover.
It's like you become an active participant in the environment, not just a passive observer.
Right. And then there's spatial awareness, which is the brain's ability to understand and navigate space.
Like having a good internal map of where things are.
Exactly. When the child is deciding which way to go, he's actively building and refining that mental map of his neighborhood.
So he's not just walking, he's learning how to navigate his world.
And the third big benefit is confidence building. That sense of autonomy, of successfully leading the way, can really boost his self-confidence.
He's making decisions, seeing the results of those decisions, and realizing he's capable of guiding the way.
It's a powerful way to build self-assurance and independence.
And this all ties back to that initial observation, right? He was so much more confident and engaged when he was leading.
Exactly. Now, the article doesn't just focus on walks. It expands on these ideas to think about learning and development in a broader sense, especially for kids.
So how does this apply to learning in general?
Well, it suggests that giving kids active roles in their learning, letting them move, explore, even lead their peers, can really increase their engagement and motivation.
So instead of just sitting and listening, they're actively participating in the learning process.
Right. The article mentions the Taxshila model of learnography, which talks about the importance of movement and interaction in learning.
And it introduces this concept of small teachers, right? Where students actually get to lead and guide their classmates.
Exactly. It's about empowering them to take ownership of their learning and help each other learn.
And the article connects this back to our walk example, right? Just like the grandson was more engaged when he was leading, students are more likely to be invested in their learning when they're actively participating and even leading the way.
Absolutely. Now, I know we've covered a lot, so let's just quickly recap the main points. The article includes an abstract, which is like a condensed summary of the key takeaways.
Sounds like a good idea. Sometimes a quick recap can really help things sink in.
Right. So the abstract starts by reminding us that motor science is all about understanding how our movements are connected to our thoughts, our learning, and our behavior.
It's about that mind-body connection, how our physical actions influence what's happening in our brains.
And it emphasizes how motor leadership, that feeling of control over our movements, can significantly boost our motivation, engagement, and even our ability to learn new things.
And it uses that simple walk example to show how just changing who's leading can dramatically change the whole experience.
Right. And it reminds us that when the child is leading, All those key brain regions we talked about, the motor cortex, basal ganglia, cerebellum, and prefrontal cortex, are all firing away,
Hmm.
helping him navigate and make decisions.
It's like his brain is fully on board with the activity, working in a more integrated way.
Exactly. And it highlights how that experience of leading helps him develop a stronger sense of autonomy, improves his spatial awareness, and strengthens his emotional connection to the activity.
So it's not just about physical movement, it's about fostering those important cognitive and emotional skills.
Right. And the abstract emphasizes that active participation isn't just a superficial thing. It actually leads to deeper cognitive processing, meaning his brain is working harder and making stronger connections.
Because it's tapping into that reward system, that dopamine rush that comes with being in control.
Exactly. And it reinforces the principles of learnography, suggesting that motor-based leadership can really accelerate learning and strengthen those neural pathways in the brain.
So it's like a more efficient and effective way to learn.
Right. And the big takeaway from the abstract is a call to action. It encourages us to intentionally integrate motor autonomy into how we approach education and child development.
To think about how we can create more opportunities for kids to lead and move and explore.
Exactly. And that brings us to the practical implications. The article offers some really tangible advice for our listeners. It encourages us to actively look for opportunities to apply this principle of motor leadership in everyday life.
So how can we actually put this into practice?
Well, it starts with giving kids more chances to be in the driver's seat, whether it's letting them choose the route on a walk or giving them more control over their learning activities.
Empowering them to make decisions and take ownership.
Exactly. And it's about thinking creatively about how we can transform typically passive activities into more interactive, movement-based experiences.
So instead of just telling kids things, we can create opportunities for them to discover and learn through movement.
Right. It's about giving them the freedom to explore their environment, make choices, and even lead their peers in learning activities.
So the next time you're interacting with a child or even thinking about how to structure any kind of learning activity, just take a moment to consider who is leading the physical aspects,
Who's calling the shots? Who's making the decisions about how and where to move?
because that seemingly small shift in leadership can actually have a huge impact on their motivation, engagement, and overall learning experience.
So as we wrap up our deep dive today, I think the key takeaway for me is the profound connection between our physical movements, the act of leading those movements, and our innate desire to learn and explore.
It's about recognizing the power of movement, not just for our bodies, but for our minds as well.
And it makes me wonder, in what ways could we consciously apply this principle in our own lives? How can we create more opportunities for ourselves and others to experience the joy and the learning that comes from leading the way?
It's a really intriguing question, and I think the article also prompts us to consider the potential benefits of this kind of motor-driven learning for people of all ages, not just children.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're interested in exploring these ideas further, the article mentions the work of Shiva Narayan and the Taxshila model and learnography. You can even find more information on system learnography by visiting the Taxshila page online.
It's a really fascinating field, and it seems like there's still so much to learn about how our movements influence our thinking and our learning.
I agree. It's exciting to think about the possibilities and how these discoveries might shape the future of education and beyond.